extension of the park. Did something for the planet.
Presentation that was taken to the legislature in 1905 when Cordele was petitioning to be a county site. A group of men went before the legislature and showed them a slide presentation of 96 slides about our county in hopes to convince them that Cordele was large enough and prosperous enough to be their own county site. The slides that you're going to view are a portion of these slides that were taken to the legislature in 1905. The original slides were glass and they were about 3 inches square. They have been duplicated by Renee Atkins and put on 35 millimeter slides so that they can be seen. So we'll start with the map of Dooley County that shows Crisp County in the southern portion of Dooley. You can see that Cordele looks like it's quite large. It had grown from a population of 300 to a population of 7,000 within a 17-year period. When Cordele was founded in 1888, there were only 300, there was a population of 300. Our next slide is a picture of the Union Depot. The depot was built around 1898, and it was on 8th Street at the base of Wall Street and 11th Avenue. Presently there is a parking lot in that spot. The depot was quite large and it was a center of activity in Cordele. At some point they had 90 trains passing through Cordele on a daily basis, and 33 of these trains were generally passenger trains. So the depot served as the center of activity in the town. This is another view of Union Depot. This is a side view of the depot. Throughout the slide presentation there will be certain titles. We're going to see some residences. This was the home of Dr. Ward. This house is located on 12th Avenue. It is still standing. It's the real estate office of Summerco. It's right behind the E&M Meats, catty-cornered from, many of you may know where Uptown Cleaners is located, and this is catty-cornered from Uptown Cleaners. Please notice that the next time you're there, the house is very similar to the way it looks today as it did in this slide in 1905. The porch has been enclosed, but it is a beautiful Victorian home, and I'm glad that it has been restored. It's one of our few houses that is directly in our downtown district that has been restored. This is another home. It was the Hunt home, and it was on 7th Street where the Firestone plant is now located. This home, like many others, lines 7th Street. It's hard for us to believe that downtown Cordele did have homes in the downtown area, but it did, and this was just an example of one of them, and many of them were this size and this magnitude. It was a beautiful home, and it was on 7th Street, the corner of 7th and 14th. Cordele is the largest city in the state that's not already a county site, with a population of 6,000. Excuse me, I told you earlier it was 7,000, it was 6,000. This is the Episcopal Church. When this slide was made, the Episcopal Church was on the corner of 14th Avenue and 7th Street in the area that's now the Southgate Shopping Center. The church was moved to this site from Gunboat Hill that was over near the Second Rachel store on the west side of town. It was then moved, when the Southgate Shopping Center was built, it was moved to 15th Avenue and 1st Street where it stands today. This was the First Presbyterian Church, and it was right behind First State Bank on 12th Avenue. Notice the crack in the side of the slide. I told you earlier that the slides were glass, and some of them have been cracked, and there are smudges on them, but this just lets you know it was a glass slide and it was cracked. Incidentally, the original projector that these slides were shown on was quite large, and it was run by candlelight. This was First Baptist Church. It was moved. It was actually located on 7th Street and 14th Avenue, where Hurt Motor Company presently has their used car lot. But it was the First Baptist Church. It was moved over to for the location of Mount Zion to use on the west side of town by A.S. Clark School. This was the Methodist Church, and it was actually stood on 7th Street and 12th Avenue, where the Power Commission now stands. This building was also moved before their church was built in 1888. Excuse me, the church was not moved. This church was moved, and the Bethel Church used it for many years, and then it was torn down. This was the academy where many of the churches in Cordele actually started. It was a schoolhouse for a number of years, but it also served as a church for many of the denominations. The kids would all go to school in this one room, whether you were in the 1st grade or the 12th grade. Some manufacturing plants. This slide is not going to really look familiar to many of you, but it's Cordele Sash, Door, and Lumber. Cordele Sash is also 100 years old, just like our city is this year, the year of 1989. Cordele Sash is also 100 years old. Many of you may notice the smokestack that's there. The smokestack was standing until just a few years ago when they had a fire. This was the Cordele Compress. It was a cotton compress, and it's where all of the farmers would bring their cotton into this location, and it would be baled and then put on the box cars and taken probably to the port of Savannah, where it was exported overseas. You'll notice that the slide is smudged in the side. It looks like it's cotton, but it's not. It's just a smudge on the slide. Another interesting thing about this slide to me is the box cars look very similar to what we see today and is being used today. But this Cordele Compress was actually between 10th and 11th Avenue. Many of you go over the overpass on a regular basis. If you were to look to the east, you would see the site of the Cordele Compress, the cotton compress, and where it was located. This is the GS&F Freight Depot. It was located down on 8th Street, the corner of 8th and 12th. Many of you know where the Cordele Dispatch is located. It's about a block from the dispatch. The building was built prior to 1895, so it's quite old. It's one of our older buildings in downtown Cordele. The dormer window that's there is no longer there in the roof, but the building does have the same lines. When the Union Depot was torn down in the latter part of the 50s, then this depot served as also the passenger depot for the few passenger trains that were coming through Cordele at that time. But it was built as a freight depot and is still used by the railroad. This is the old brick warehouse on 9th Avenue. And many of y'all here probably know where Randy Brown used to have his Suzuki shop there on the corner of 9th Avenue and 7th Street. Well, this is the building that's directly next to it. The Ellis's also had an implement company there. It's used as storage now. But if you'll notice the skylight that's on the roof, it's still there. They're there are no glass windows in it, but it does have fiberglass in it. But the building is recognizable, and it faces the railroad track on 9th Avenue. This was the Hamilton Busby Cotton Warehouse. I'm not actually sure where this was located, I think it was between the railroad tracks, but I haven't been able to document this. By 1912, Cordele was actually servicing the South Georgia area as one of the major warehouses for the railroad. It was right up there with Brunswick, Savannah, and Macon. So we were quite a large railroad center. The town was built because of our railroads, and these warehouses let us know that it really was a viable business during that time. Some wholesale business houses. Okay. This building is on Wall Street, and I know it looks very familiar to a lot of you. You know where Rubens is located. Well, it's toward the back door of Rubens is on Wall Street. I am assuming that this building had just been completed. You see the nail kegs that are on the side of the building. It looks like maybe it was just under construction. The first group of buildings there was another building that was built after this one, and then there's a Coke sign that's on the building. Maybe many of you have seen that, but it was they served as grocery stores, and Wall Street used to be an alley. It was opened up and is now actually a street, but it did serve as an alley at one time. This was the Parker Willis Wholesale Grocery Company. It's there on the corner of 8th Street, and 11th Avenue. We're looking at the back of the building at this point. This was the P.H. Willis Company. Bridge & Brothers is now located in this building. It's on the corner of Wall Street and 6th Street. This picture is interesting because you can notice that the streets are not paved. These slides were taken in 1905, and the streets were not paved until probably 10 years later. However, our sidewalks were paved. We had a lot of advantages by then. Our sidewalks were paved by 1905, but the streets were not. You'll notice that you don't see any automobiles in these slides. The automobile was just, at this point, being manufactured on the assembly line, and I doubt that there were any in South Georgia. This was the Cordele Sanatorium. It also served not only as a hospital, as Cordele's first hospital, but it was a school at one time. It's an interesting building. I think many of you will say that it really doesn't look like a hospital, but that's what it was. To me, it looks like it ought to be out on the beach somewhere as a nice beach home. But it was built at the turn of the century. Unfortunately, it burned in January of 1915. It was located on the site of Central Savings Bank. So y'all all know where Central Savings Bank is located. This was on the site of Central Savings Bank. There was a school directly in front of it, O'Neill School. Now this building is really interesting. If any of you were to guess what this building might be, you'd probably say that it was a church. Well, no, it's not a church. It was actually our city waterworks. It was a clapboard building. It's really quite ornate and has some decorative features for being a government building, but it was the Cordele Waterworks. This building is interesting to me because it was our electric light plant, and I know it looks like it needs some attention probably, but it was located down on 9th Avenue and 8th Street. If you know where Cordele Concrete is now located, this building was located there, and it was our city electric light plant. We did have electric lights at the turn of the century. You'll notice the pole out front. We also had telephones. By 1893, we had a telephone system here in Cordele. By 1895, you could call Diana. So we had electric lights and telephones and running water. We were uptown working. This was the C.C. Cutts building. You notice the sign says land sold on easy terms. Cordele was heavy into the timber and industry business when we were first founded. This building is located on the corner of 8th Street and 11th Avenue. Many of you know where the pool room is. It's right down at the bottom of the hill from the pool room. It has been stuccoed, a good portion of it, and it is painted white. But 8th Avenue served as probably the busiest area in our downtown because the depot was right there. The depot was actually catty-cornered from this building. And there was a lot of activity going on, and 8th Street was a busy, busy street at that time. This was the Riles Drugstore building, and it's not going to look familiar to y'all, unfortunately, because the facade has been completely changed on it. The building used to be the Diana shop. It's on the corner of 7th Street and 11th Avenue, across the street from the Gaines Drugstore building. But during the 60s, unfortunately, many people in the downtown wanted their buildings to be more modern, so they came in and either put up stucco panels or aluminum siding. And unfortunately, that's what happened to this particular building. There's an insurance company on the second floor of this building. This building is located on the corner of Wall Street and 7th Street. It has, right now, a hand printing has been in the building for a number of years in the second window there. In looking at this photograph, I am assuming that this building was just completed because it looks as if the building is maybe not occupied. So it does show up on some early maps, but I think maybe it had been completed just shortly. An automobile dealership has been in the building in the past. It has housed several different businesses. Hand printing isn't a portion of the building. There's a large open ballroom on the second floor. I'm not sure what these men are moving across the street. It's kind of interesting. Maybe it was lumber. Again, notice that the streets are not paved. This was the Hind and Churchville building. It's on 8th Street. It's there on the alley, the 11 and a half alley and 8th Street. Unfortunately, aluminum siding does cover up this building. The Churchville brothers had dry goods stores. They also had a wholesale business, and they lived in Cordele at one time, and later their businesses grew and they moved to Jacksonville, Florida. But this is a handsome building. Unfortunately, it has been altered, but maybe the aluminum will come down at one point and we can see the original facade on this building. Again, this was a building on 8th Street. Now, this building is not going to look familiar to y'all because it's no longer standing, but this was our original City Hall and Opera House. It was built right at the turn of the century. It shows up in some early maps of 1895. So it was an opera house before it served as City Hall, and it was also served as an opera house and City Hall at the same time. It was located on Wall Street behind the Cordele Carnegie Library. There is a warehouse in that spot now. Unfortunately, it was torn down about 10 years ago when our present City Hall was built. Well, more than 10 years now. But it was City Hall, and the fire department and the council chambers were all in this building. What's interesting is this is actually the back of the building. The front of the building faced Wall Street. And at one point in time, a railroad track was laid very close to the building, so they decided to open Wall Street up and make it a street rather than the back alley. So this served as the front of the building. They had to change sides, so the front of the building was changed to the Wall Street entrance. This says Cordele already has a suitable building for holding court, as well as a commodious jail, and have pledged the free use of both for 5 years to Crisp County if created. So you see, they're letting our legislators know that we have a building that's adequate for court, which is the one we just saw. It was our City Hall, and a jail. interesting that they're still having problems with jails and need a lot of space there. A commodious means large jail. And the city of Cordele is going to let Crisp County use this particular facility if it's created. This is a picture of what was known as the Pride Block. It was on 8th Street, on the corner of 8th Street and 12th Avenue. The Fair store was located there for a number of years. It's now occupied by Outlets Unlimited. You can see watermelons in a portion of this building on the front. So there was a grocery store there. I believe there have been several mercantile stores, but there was also a grocery store there. It's hard for us to realize, but downtown Cordele was the only spot that you could come to actually buy your clothes, your shoes, your groceries, anything that you needed. The hardware stores were here. So downtown was the center of activity, and you came to the downtown area to purchase anything that you might need. It's hard for us to believe that the interstate was not always in Cordele and that all of the shopping areas out towards the interstate were not there, but they weren't. That was farmland, and the center of town was where everything happened. This is an interesting shot, and it took me a while to actually realize where these buildings were located. The title that was on this slide was the Daily News Building, but this is actually the building that is right next to First State Bank. When this shot was taken, First State Bank was not standing. I mean, it had not been built yet. It was not built until 2 years later. But Dr. Chancey has his optical office in the second bay that's here. The second floor of this window of this slide was used for as a boarding house. Many of you may know that our Centennial store is located in this first bay here that's next to the alley. The building looks very similar, except the awnings are no longer there and the fronts have been changed. The entrances have been changed. I hope this looks familiar to all of you. This is our Cordele Carnegie Library. You notice the City Hall in the background. You can see it. This library was built between 1903 and 1904. In 1903, the Carnegie Foundation gave Cordele $17,000 to build a library. It was the second Carnegie Library to be built in the state of Georgia. If you'll notice on the side that there are just two windows on the side of this building. In 1917, the library was added on to, and it was almost doubled in size. The dome on the library is something that y'all haven't seen in your lifetime, and I haven't met anybody that remembers it actually being on the library. I am assuming that in 1917, when the addition was made to the library, then maybe the dome was taken off for some reason. It was never put back. Then you know several years ago, 2 years ago, we had another addition to our library. But this was the original Carnegie Library, and the funds were appropriated in 1903 for the library. This is a group of buildings that are on 11th Avenue. If you look to the end of the slide, you'll see the Swanee Hotel. Then the next building is the Gaines Drug Store, and then the pool room that's familiar to you all. The next building is where Jones Jewelers was located for a number of years. And then the building with Wilkes out front was the Western Auto for a number of years, and now houses Top Dollar. Again, you notice the streets were not paved, and there were trees up around the Swanee Hotel. Okay, this is another picture of the building. It was titled in the slides the Williams Building. Evidently, Mr. Williams built the building. You see the front of the building has the curved glass with the transom over the glass windows in the front. It's a handsome building. It still remains very much the same today. I do want you to notice though that there is a person probably that's sitting up in that window on the second floor. A dentist was located on the second floor for a number of years, and it used to be that if you needed to see a doctor or a dentist in Cordele, you would go on the second floor of many of the buildings downtown. So maybe this young person was actually having a tooth pull or whatever. But there is a buggy out front. It's kind of a fancy buggy with horse and buggy to the front and the front of the store. Okay. This building, again, is not going to look familiar to you. Unfortunately, it has been altered to the point that you would not recognize it. This is the building. This is what Cordele Banking Company used to look like. Cordele Bank is on the corner of 11th Avenue and 7th Street. The building was altered and changed somewhere in the 1960s, to the best of my knowledge. This building is on the corner of 8th Street and 11th Avenue. It is still standing and looks very much the same today. However, the second floor windows have been boarded up. Hopefully this is a building that will be rehabilitated. You see the bay window, or the bay that's sitting out over the sidewalk on the second floor. It's terracotta. It is most unusual. The building, this particular building, was the second brick building in downtown Cordele to be built. The Gaines Drug Store building was the first brick building. This was the second brick building. And it shows up on the early maps that I have from 1891. So it was built probably shortly after the Gaines Drug Store building. It was directly across the street from the depot, from Union Depot. It housed the Citizens Bank, and again was probably a real active corner in town. This is from the Office of the Mayor and City Council of Cordele, Georgia. I certify there are doing business in Cordele 162 bona fide licensed retail business houses. July the 12th, 1905, John Beasley, Clerk and Treasurer. So they're stating that Cordele is a prosperous town, and again trying to reinforce the fact that we wanted to be a county site. And they were bragging about the fact that we had 162 licensed businesses. This picture is going to look familiar to a lot of you, I hope. This is the Swanee Hotel. Unfortunately, the Swanee does not look exactly like this today. The Swanee was, the porches were removed from the Swanee Hotel back in 1924 when they wanted to remodel it. The Swanee Hotel was built in 1890. The cost to build the Swanee was $65,000, and it was built by an investment group from Americas. An investment group from Americas actually bought the land to form the city of Cordele. So the Swanee Hotel was built shortly after that. The porches were removed in the 20s. An elevator was added in the 20s, and also you will notice that you used to step up to the Swanee Hotel. Also in 1924, they lowered the Swanee so that the first level of businesses would be on the street. So the Swanee, the first floor was actually lowered to street level in 1924. The reason all of this took place was because in 1926 a new hotel was built that was almost directly next door to the Swanee, the Cordelia. We don't have pictures of it naturally because that was not built until 20 years later. But when the Cordelia was built, it was extremely upsetting to the people who owned the Swanee, and they did try to modernize, they thought, the Swanee. The porches were removed. Also, stucco was added to the outside of a good portion of the Swanee. Unfortunately, it's caused a problem today because moisture has gotten in behind the stucco and the bricks have begun to fall. This is another shot of the Swanee. You see the barber pole out front and the chair on the front porch. It was the center of activity as far as housing in Cordele, and a hotel, and a fine hotel to stay. This was Governor Brown's home. It was located on the site that the Swanee Hotel now stands. They called it the Executive Mansion. It doesn't look like a mansion, I realize that, but Governor Brown was Georgia's governor during the Civil War, and he had a plantation that was in South Dooley County. And actually this plantation is really where the city of Cordele now stands. But this was his home. It was located, like I mentioned a second ago, on the site of the Swanee Hotel. When the Swanee Hotel was built, it was moved to another portion of town and then later torn down. It looks like there's a breezeway going through the center of the house, and it actually is. It was called a dog trot, and it was built in a lot of southern homes for ventilation. This is a view from the back of the house. Again, Governor Brown's farmhouse plantation home. It's been said that actually his garden was where the library now stands. So, you know, that would be about right. The Swanee Hotel is not but about 50 yards from the library. So this was an important site. I'm sorry that this house was torn down. This is actually, may look familiar to some of y'all. It's the Dooley County Courthouse. Dooley County was formed by a treaty in 1821. I'm not sure the date that this courthouse was built, but I mentioned earlier that Dooley County was so large they called it the state of Dooley. There were 7 counties that were actually taken from Dooley County. But this is a handsome building. It is still standing. It is on the square up in Vianna. Some election scenes. This is interesting to me. All of the men are standing on the sidewalks. I'm sure they're talking about if it was election day, all of the candidates and who was the best one to actually vote for. This is interesting to me. If you'll notice, there are no ladies in this picture. Ladies were not allowed to vote in 1905. They couldn't vote until 1919. So all of the men are discussing the matters of the day and taking care of business. This building that's in the background is actually on the corner of 8th and 11th. It's the cash drugstore building, the building we saw earlier that had the CC Cup sign on it. Mr. Shepherd had a grocery store on 8th Street. There's some men standing in front of the sign there. This was Colonel Strozier, Judge Strozier. He lived to be quite old. It looks like maybe he was young when this was taken. You notice the sheriff's deputy, the buggy that's next to Colonel Strozier. There is also the Union Depot in the background. Again, this was taken on 8th Street. I imagine it was probably in front of the Citizens Bank. This is an interesting shot of this group of men. Senator Crum is the man that is standing there with his vest pocket open. I do not know the other men in the picture. I do want you to notice their dress. It's quite interesting, and the hats that they have on. The building in the background is the building that actually housed the Citizens Bank that we discussed earlier. The awning in the background, actually Chris Crafts is located in that spot now. The building has been altered some, but you still can recognize it. This was Mr. Williams, and he's standing in front of the Citizens Bank there on 8th Street and 11th Avenue. Again, this is just a picture of some election scenes. Again, notice that the streets are not paved. All right, we're ending our slide presentation now. This is, we have done our best to please you and hope we have succeeded. For Crisp County, with Cordele as the county site, is one of the greatest desires of our hearts. I find this almost emotional They are just letting them know that they have worked hard on these slides and trying to present Cordele and Crisp County. I mentioned earlier that there were 96 slides in the original slide presentation. I understand that they made many slides and just chose 96 of them. And now as we close our case, we point with pride to that distinguished Georgian to whose memory we appeal to you to aid us in erecting this lasting monument. And this is a picture of Charles Frederick Crisp that our county is named for. Judge Crisp was actually from Americus. He served in Washington for 6 consecutive terms. He was Speaker of the House of Representatives. He was indeed a distinguished Georgian. I have learned recently from some historians in the state that it was unusual to be given the name that you asked for in forming a county. But for some reason, the legislature did let us name our county Crisp County as we petitioned for and asked for. So I guess we should be pleased that we actually were given the name that we asked for. And this is a portrait of Mr. Judge Crisp. We thank you very much for your courteous and patient hearing, and we earnestly hope for your favorable consideration. Good night. And this ends our slide presentation that was actually made in 1905 when we petitioned the legislature to be a county site. And I thank you very much.